very good evening to everybody. I'm delighted to join you this evening for GIC Insights Gala Dinner.
今天呢，我们在这个纽约的这个招待会上，来这个庆祝这个新加坡国家投资公司的纪念。大概是说吧，这个谢龙呢总理就总结了一下这个历史嘛，自新以来，新加坡在美国的投资呢，从这个从无到有。逐渐学习，然后目前呢，新加坡政府投资公司 GIC 在美国的这个整个 portfolio 里边有大概1/3，然后他学习了很多东西，而且他相信美国的经济会这个有一个良好的前景。
And tonight, let me tell you a little bit more about this story. By the early 1980s, the Singapore economy was growing rapidly. The government had been frugal, and the country had accumulated a modest sum of reserves. Traditionally, it is the central bank's job to manage such reserves, and these would mainly be held in liquid assets, money markets, sovereign bonds, gold. The investment mandate would have been to ensure sufficient liquidity in Singapore's financial system and enough resources to manage the exchange rate. But Singapore had built up a little more than what its central bank needed. And the government therefore started to think about how best to invest these funds for the long term, to preserve and hopefully to grow them over time for use on some rainy day. And thus, GIC was born in 1981. It was separate from the Monetary Authority of Singapore and its central banking responsibilities. It had a focused mindset, a dedicated team, and a distinct organizational ethos. And it was given a clear mandate to invest the government's financial reserves externally with a view to maximizing long-term, risk-adjusted real returns. GIC was set up as a company owned by the Singapore government rather than as a government department or a statutory board. This way, GIC could manage its portfolio professionally, free from political influence. The company could set personnel and remuneration policies aligned with market practice to offer competitive terms and attract capable talent. And the management team could make their own investment decisions based purely on commercial considerations to achieve their target long-term returns on GIC's invested funds. At the time, GIC was sui generis, one of a kind. It was the first non-commodity-based sovereign wealth fund in the world. Since then, many other countries have set up similar sovereign wealth funds. GIC recognized right from the beginning that to fulfill its mission, it needed to get into the US markets. The US was the biggest and most advanced economy in the world, and then accounted for about a quarter of the world economy. It was at the forefront of global entrepreneurship and innovation. It also championed free flows of trade and investment, and in fact had one of the most open economies among the developed countries. Its capital markets welcome investments and economic exchange with almost every other country, less the Soviet bloc. It was the largest single source of FDI, as well as the single largest recipient of FDI in the world. And therefore, the US had to be a central part of GIC's portfolio and operations. But to invest in the US, GIC had first to understand how American markets worked and how America worked. We needed a presence on the ground. That was why when our founding managing director, Dr. Yong Pang Hao, was setting up the company in 1981, he visited New York City. He came in search of financial talent to help jumpstart the company and lead our investments into American markets. Dr. Yong recruited 3 American fund managers, Leo Bailey, who was an authority on US equities, Theodore Garhart, a US real estate investment expert, and Douglas Salmon, a Japanese equities expert. Their expert knowledge and extensive networks helped tremendously in getting GIC started. 3 years later, we opened our first international office here in New York City. Using this office as our base, we invested steadily in the US markets, gained experience, and grew our portfolio. Today, New York is GIC's largest office outside of Singapore, which is another reason why we are celebrating our anniversary here. The way GIC invested also evolved over time. We started off cautiously, even gingerly, with most of the portfolio comprising sovereign bonds, some equities, and just a bit of real estate. As a young organization, GIC was understandably risk-averse and apprehensive about risking and losing Singapore's hard-earned money. The more so as the portfolio had previously been invested in practically risk-free assets, and GIC had not yet developed a sophisticated sense of the risks which the portfolio would now be exposed to, or of the risks which the portfolio ought to take. But with time and experience, we understood more clearly the trade-off between avoiding excessive risks and maximizing long-term returns. GIC learned how to measure and manage the risks it took, and also their expected returns. GIC worked with its client to define the amount of risk which the portfolio should accept, and worked within this risk budget to maximize expected long-term returns. As our portfolio and capabilities grew, the composition of our investments gradually shifted. We began to apply modern portfolio theory, increasing the proportion of equities relative to bonds and cash. As US markets evolved and new asset types and investment instruments were invented and popularized, we updated our investment strategies. We did our due diligence to understand the trends and the emerging risks. If we judged the new investment class sound and prudent, we committed some funds. But if we did not understand the new types of investments, or if we felt that they were overhyped, we would sit out that dance. For example, GIC first ventured into private equity back in 1982, when it was a relatively new and niche investment class. At first, we only committed small amounts through funds managed by other fund managers. Over time, we built up our expertise and established valuable partnerships with then fledgling PE firms, many of them now global names. As the PE landscape broadened, we steadily grew our exposure, both in absolute terms and as a proportion of the portfolio. In time, GIC became one of the largest and most established PE investors in the industry. We also invested in successive waves of new technology. We started with listed technology companies and later participated in venture capital funds. We witnessed the American economy's amazing ability to direct capital and talent into promising areas of growth, delivering new technological breakthroughs every so often. And so we did our best to prepare and participate in successive waves of new technology and market interest, whether it was the proliferation of the personal computer and the internet in the 1990s, or the smartphone in the 2000s, or cloud computing. And now, with AI, like everyone else, we are studying how best to catch the wave and yet not be carried away by excessive exuberance. GIC has also gone into infrastructure investments and is now closely tracking the private credit markets. So starting from very bond-heavy beginnings, we progressively diversified our portfolio to improve expected returns while managing risk and volatility. Today, we have a majority equity portfolio that we continue to actively manage. We've stayed invested in the US through thick and thin because of its vital role in the world economy. And we continue to have faith in the US economy's vibrance, dynamism, and sheer resilience. GIC's decades of investing in US markets have not always been smooth sailing. We weathered many peaks and troughs and stayed invested in rough times. We grew together during the booms and remained a steadfast and responsible investor during more trying and volatile periods. The first big test came just 3 years after our New York office opened, Black Monday on the 19th of October, 1987. That stock market crash was severe and unexpected. The Dow Jones Industrial Average experienced its largest single-day percentage decline ever, a record which still stands today, 22.6%. GIC was a young startup then. Black Monday tested our mettle, but we had conviction in the long-term potential of the US markets and did not liquidate our positions. We weathered the dot-com boom and the bust cycle similarly too. In the 2008 global financial crisis, we de-risked a little, but we stayed substantially invested in the US. In fact, GIC contributed to critical capital raises and did our bit to help stabilize the broader financial system. After considerable uncertainty and many anxious moments, the global economy stabilized and US equity markets more than recovered. And so thankfully did the GIC portfolio. More recently, the COVID pandemic threw global markets into turmoil. Again, we sat tight and weathered the storm. GIC invested capital in portfolio companies, and this capital also supported the development of healthcare solutions, research trials for vaccines, and the provision of critical healthcare supplies. GIC has been able to do this because we are able to take a long-term view. We know that markets go through cycles. That's an unavoidable reality, which we must accept and ride through with some equanimity if we are to maximize long-term returns. This is a very different mindset from other market players, many of whom have shorter time horizons. They too aim to invest in something promising, but with a clear exit strategy defined upfront to liquidate and distribute the profits by a target sunset date. For GIC, there is no predetermined end date.
所以呢，显能总理就回顾了一下这个 GIC 的历史啊，是吧？这个作为一个国家的股权基金的基本的这个策略是什么？就保持一个长期的一个相对稳定的回报，是吧？包括经过了很多这些波折，是吧？啊，但基本上讲，这个显能总理的意思是什么呢？咱们是一个长期主义，并没有这个近期的有期限的盈利打算，所以基本上讲保持了一个4%的年化率，应该讲这是非常优秀的啊，4%的年化率。
You are probably being too cautious. At the same time, when GIC's investments do well, we try our best to keep our heads and not get carried away. GIC's total portfolio has grown steadily and done well, achieving an average annual return of about 4% over the past 20 years. And this is over and above the global inflation rate because it's a real rate of return. We've stayed here in the US throughout 40 very successful years of partnership, whether the market moved up, down, or sideways. We were there before the book Dow at 36,000 was written, which is 25 years ago. And now we're still here, and the Dow is
然后
about to
呢，
be
总理又
44,000.
这个大概表示了这么一个理念吧，是吧？咱们是复利，是吧？复利啊，复利的理念。这个复利呢，即使一个不是特别大的一个年化率啊，长期来讲也是收益很大，是吧？咱们讲72定律，是吧？假如说4%的年化率，大概就是不到20年就能翻一番嘛，对吧？啊，然后他对美国的经济表示了信心。
And not just in the US, considerations of national security, resilience, and staying ahead of competitors and rivals have become increasingly important. Economic considerations are becoming secondary. Political support.
然后呢，李显龙总理也谈到了目前的这个世界局势的变化，是吧？经过了这个种种危机。现在世界进入一个不太可预测的一个形势，是吧？这个从这个全球化到单边主义，从这个国家的自我保护等等等等很多不可预测的因素，然后他表示一个信心啊，咱们可以这个在有效的风险评估下进行有效的这个投资，获得应有的收益，大概是这么一个意思。他感谢了这些多年的这些 partner， 对吧？啊。
We are no longer just calculating stochastic quantitative risks that we can model and estimate, but also assessing uncertainties that are harder to predict and scenarios with unquantifiable probabilities and unforeseeable consequences. We have to weigh the implications of these different possibilities for our portfolio to make sound financial decisions. Will normal cycles of recession and recovery persist, or will they be disrupted by strategic, political, or security considerations and developments? Will markets continue to function, or will geopolitical events shut down certain businesses while boosting others? Will GIC need to hold a stock of physical gold? And if so, where? A fund manager like GIC
所以他提到很多目前的现代世界形势的跟以前的不同之处，是吧？这个所谓的这种建模呀、计量的办法去评估风险呢，可能在某些情况下是不适用的，是吧？无法预测、无法量化呀。这个所以说，所谓的这种计量经济学有时候是没用的啊，这种 modeling 有时候是没用的。所以说，有时候要这种判断，是吧？包括这个不可预测的这种地域政治的变化，这种各种各样的不可预测的因素啊，在目前更加的成为一个挑战，所以 GIC 呢面临的挑战也是啊。
Such investments can also benefit local communities. Two of our portfolio's companies illustrate this point. One is building a battery plant in West Virginia on the site of an old steel mill to manufacture iron-air batteries that provide long-duration energy storage. The plant will create hundreds of jobs in the local community. Another firm is working with school districts across the US to electrify school transportation. And recently it announced the first 100% electric school bus fleet in the US, and that's in Oakland, California. These are just a few of the many opportunities that the US offers, and therefore we fully intend to continue investing in the US and maintaining American assets as a substantial part of our overall portfolio. We have every confidence that this is the correct choice for our fund, taking a long-term perspective. Over 40 years, our
所
partnership
以这
with the
个
US
显龙
has
总理也
grown
举
from
了
strength to
例
strength.
子来表示，这个不光
And for
是
this,
这
we
个
are
经济
grateful
的
to our US partners and fund managers,
回报，
many of
包括
whom
对
we have
本
enjoyed
地社区
long
的这种
relationships
这个
with,
实际的影
and
响，
quite a
对
few
吧？
of whom are
举
here
了
with us
这
in this
么
room tonight.
2个例子啊。所以
The
说，基本
mutual
上这是
trust
显
and
龙总理
confidence
在
that we
纽约的
established
谈话。
enabled us to prosper together.
GIC 的这一个成功的主
I'm
权基
happy to
金
have all of
啊，
you
希望
with
它的
us
未来
to
更好。
celebrate this anniversary together, and thank you very much for your support all these years.
然后，新加坡风老师
In
到
a
from
world where
Singapore， 欢迎
zero-sum
关注
mindsets are growing
油管
more
和
prevalent,
微信
I'm very
署
glad
名
to have
新加坡风
investor
老师 Dr.
conferences
from
like the one
Singapore，
we
真实
held
就是力
today,
量，跟你分享真
where
实
we
的
can candidly exchange
事
views
实与
on
看法。
shared opportunities and dangers, and all can work towards creating wealth and prosperity in a mutually beneficial way. Thank you all once again for your trust and partnership with
我感
GIC.
觉显
We
龙
look
总理
forward
的
to
讲话非
continuing
常
this
的
journey
这
with
个
you for many decades to come.
落地、
Thank you very much.
坦白、真实。